Welcome to VLGA Connect. I'm Catherine Arndt and you're listening to the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, welcome to TGU from VLGA Connect, sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. In a hot spell, our first real hot spell for the year. And I'm going to introduce our panel members who are in various locations around the state. I think it might be a little bit warmer where you are, Tony Rownick, than perhaps where we are.
Yes, up in Kerrang today. So I think we're pitching for 36 degrees today in Kerrang. But look, we've got a heat wave across the state, haven't we? It's coming, and I think warmer days in Melbourne tomorrow indeed as well.
Yeah,
exactly. And Julie Reed's here. Hi, Julie. Where are you today?
Hi. Oh, actually, I've come back from Macedon Ranges, and I'm back in my office today. And then, same as Tony, I'm off on Sunday to head up north to the hot area, the same area up to Gannawarra. So, oh boy, it's the heat doesn't. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm an English rose. I don't like the heat.
Hopefully some relief on the way by Sunday. But anyway, I don't know. Clearly, you have both been busy around the state working with various councils. I'm not sure how many of the mayoral election proceedings you've been watching. We might sort of come to that and pick out some highlights and lowlights in just a moment. But also today, we want to talk about the Rural Council's Victoria Federal Election Platform, which has just come out this week. Finally, some action on the Townsville mayor up in Queensland. He's been suspended on full pay. We'll talk a bit more about that. But I want to start with the call for an inquiry into the conduct of Victoria's local government elections. They're just finished. There's been lots of issues reported on in the press around the postal ballot. Obviously, we've got that issue with suspected vote tampering for 2 wards, but also the impact of single-member wards and a few other issues. Tony, can I start with you? The calls come from the Greens. We're not sure if it's going to get support from the other parties at this point, but do you think it is time for an inquiry after just one election cycle with this new system?
No, look, personally, I don't think it's, the concerns are so large as to have some sort of wholesale inquiry. I see that the Green spokesperson, Tim Reeds, calls it, council elections are a shadowy affair. I don't think that that's the case. I perhaps don't think it's coincidence that perhaps the Greens didn't do as well, this election as they did last, and now they're calling for that inquiry. I do agree that in terms of the city of Melbourne, it is more difficult for councillors of that, much more local Greens persuasion representing the residents to get up, because businesses have a significant impact on the outcome of the election. But, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I think that the sense of maybe corruption or things having attempts to corrupt the system, probably a better way to describe it, alleged, they seem to be isolated incidents.
Yeah, and this issue also of political affiliations, I think, has come up in the commentary here about whether more needs to be done to ensure that voters know about the political affiliations of the candidates. Julie, do you think that's an issue that needs to be looked at?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of thinking similar to Tony. I'm not too sure whether there are systemic issues. There are they've talked in here about some issues that have come up, but I don't know whether they're things that we already knew about. So, they talk about the shift to single member wards and the disadvantages for candidates around that. But I'm not too sure whether that's a systemic problem. It's a decision that's been made that might have some disadvantages, but any model will have disadvantages. Having multiple member wards will have disadvantages. There'll be members that will, or councillors that will work really hard in that ward, and others that will ride on the coattails of those councillors that are working really hard. Sure, single member ward means that, if there's somebody that's unwell, then, you haven't got a representation in the ward, for example, and there's some of the things that have come up in discussions with councillors. But I'm not sure whether that's systemic problems. They've talked about secretive donation disclosure rules as well, the issues around that, and they've talked about the double votes for businesses in the city of Melbourne. So, but again, you know, I think I'm with Tony on that one. It's sort of, I don't know whether I think that there's enough there for an inquiry.
How much of this is inherently political, though? Because the Greens haven't done
Yeah.
as well as they did last time around.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
is it, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, is it a case of we didn't get the result we were expecting, therefore the system needs a good hard look?
Yeah, and
look, I think there's an
they're
element of that. Yeah.
they're grasping at straws really for what those systemic issues are. Sorry, Tony.
That being said, I think, you know, I understand the argument for a bit more real-time campaign donation disclosure. So what happens now is that, you know, I can run for council and some benefactor in the community, maybe even a developer, maybe, you know, someone with a particular personal interest in council affairs might back me financially. I don't have to disclose that till 40 days post the election. But then I also think, you know, how would you go doing this real time? I mean, I'm running around doing my campaigning and some money gets put into my campaign account. Do I really know that? Am I, you know, logistically able to report that in real time? It probably works at a state or federal government level where they have a whole party machine, but not for, you know, independent candidates.
All right. So as we understand it, it's a push from the Greens. We don't know if the opposition is going to support it. I believe they're discussing it at a state cabinet meeting next week. And I don't think there's been any comment from the government or the local government minister at this point on that call for an inquiry. So we'll wait and see. Lots of mayoral elections by my count. We've got 16 left to be resolved. One of them is the quirky deputy mayor-elect at Greater Bendigo, so we sort of know how that's going to finish. So let's say 15 to come. That means 63 have been determined over the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure how many of these you've watched, Julie and Tony. I've watched a few. Tragic, I know. And we're seeing quite a few first-time councillors being elected to mayor positions, but we're also seeing a lot of experienced former mayors stepping back into the role as well. It's a real mix around the state. Yeah,
it is. There's some significant sort of changes as well. You know, Danny Goss, mayor at Bawbaw, is a significant change to that council. Campaspe, Jessica Mitchell. I did some candidacy training for Jessica, first-time candidate, and she's the deputy mayor up there at Campaspe, so good on her. I was struck Whittlesea, Aidan McClendon, who's the anti-lockdown Freedom Party candidate. So that's you know, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I've had a few messages come through to me, probably because of my former association with Whittlesea, about that interesting, people say, appointment as mayor there at Whittlesea, a former Queensland MP. I think at one time was part of the Katters Party, if I got that right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he parlays all of that, if he does, into his local government career as the mayor of a council that's been under administration for 4 or so years.
Absolutely. Well, you know, is that indicative of how, you know, the sort of stands of those parties indicative of the approach you'll take at Whittlesea, or is that just, you know, water under the bridge past history?
And is it indicative, Tony, of the collective thinking of that new group of councillors who've elected him?
There's some sympathy for those views, I imagine.
Yeah. Okay, we'll watch that one with interest. Any others that stand out?
Mary Beck, I thought, was not the predicted result. So despite the Greens having 4 out of the 9 elected councillors, the Greens candidate there, Adam Pulford, didn't get up.
And it was a 1 vote. It was a 6-5 vote, I think.
Independent Helen Davidson has got up on a 6-5, as you say, and Labor's Helen Politis is the deputy mayor. So, yeah, just, you know, if we had stood back and looked at that one, certainly the media pundits were suggesting the Greens would elect a mayor there, having 4 of the 9, but that isn't the way the cards of, you know, the votes have landed.
And you've missed the most significant thing about that, Tony. That's the only council in the state where the mayor and the deputy mayor have the same first name.
Ah, that could be confusing.
Mayor Helen, Deputy Mayor Helen. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Couple that stood out for me, Chris,
Yeah.
are Councillor Chris Bolam's, who's been in Frankston for some time, is stepped up into the mayoral role. So not surprising to see someone who's so experienced down
Yeah.
at Frankston stepping into that role. So that's an observation there. The other observation I had was around Burundara. Councillor Sophie Tawney, who's a brand new councillor, has stepped into the role of mayor there with Councillor Victor Franco, who is a returning councillor who stepped into the deputy mayor role. So a nice blend there of new and returning councillor at the helm at Burundara. So a couple that stood out for me there.
And for some time, we've seen a major changing of the demographics of Melbourne's west with all that growth that's happening out there. And I think a sign of that is Maribyrnong has elected its first mayor of Indian heritage and another
Yes.
first-time councillor in Pradeep Tiwari. And we wish him the best in that role as well. Interesting times, aren't they?
Yeah, that was great news. I thought that was terrific for the municipality. Yeah.
And experience at Wyndham with Mia Shaw and Josh Gilligan, last night elected to the mayor and deputy mayor. I had the pleasure of spending some time with the Wyndham councillors earlier this week. But there was an interesting thing that happened at that meeting, and I wanted to ask you both what you think about this. I've seen at a few council meetings this week in particular, where there's been more than one nomination for the role of mayor or deputy, and where the first nomination has been put to the vote and the absolute majority has been achieved on the first showing of hands, the second nomination hasn't been put. And I'll ask Rhys about this a little later as well to see what he thinks. Hasn't been put and therefore tested to see how many votes that second nomination would have had. And there's another element to this that I'll ask you about in a second. But firstly, your thoughts on that, Tony?
Yeah, so the Act says, of course, that the mayor needs to be elected by an absolute majority. But it's silent on this issue of, how do you, I guess one show of hands, if there's an absolute majority, one might argue that that's been achieved.
Yeah.
Where I think councils can fall into a trap is where they do go down this path under the governance rules of there are two candidates, equal votes, we'll pull a name out of a hat, that person's the winner. Oh, no. We've got some local protocol that that person's now the only candidate. Let's now have a vote. We still need an absolute majority vote.
Yes.
See what I mean? You've got to have that resolution with the absolute majority. Would be no good to just rely on having pulled out of the hat.
Are we aware of any examples perhaps of that happening? Because I noticed we do have some councils now that have an even number of councillors, don't we? So the potential for a tie vote is there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not aware of that, Chris. This is new for me. So, and I was sort of thinking and scrambling to see whether I could see anything. I think it would depend on the governance rules, what the governance rules say, because some of them are very specific, and we could be heading for standard governance rules into the future, and these are the types of things that might need to be addressed.
And of course, it doesn't need to have a council that's got an equal number. I know at least one where there was a councillor absent. I think it was Casey. Nillumbik, I notice. Benalla has put theirs back because a councillor was away on leave this week. So, those scenarios are quite possible, and we don't want to see a return to the days where the bingo ball was pulled out of the barrel, do we? And as Tony says, you've got to have the absolute majority regardless. All right.
And it comes down to luck and how do people feel in that space. It's not a brilliant space to be in where you're drawing by lot, as we call it.
No, those days are gone, I think. Although I noticed in Canada this week, there was a municipal election where two candidates had the exact same number of votes, and they've got to come back for a drawing of the name out of a box to determine the result. It's not a great governance process, is it?
No, and it's not a great look for the community either, from the community's perspective, it's like, oh, so you couldn't decide between two candidates, and now we're
But
having
also,
to draw the raffle. It's
Yeah.
not a good look from a
the government sort of
reputation.
set us up for that, though, didn't they? When they
Yeah,
put, even numbers
Yeah.
in
yeah, that's
the
right.
number of councils. And look, I'm sorry because I'm not sure ultimately what happened in some councils, but I do know that as things, people test the numbers in the lead up. I know there are a number of councils where it was known that there was an even number of candidates on either side. So I'm not quite sure how some of those matters were ultimately resolved. But
Yeah.
the key there, governance officers, is don't rely on your governance rules to elect the mayor. Maybe rely on the governance rules to resolve an impasse, but then go in and have the vote and get your absolute majority.
Yeah.
Mm.
So the other element to that issue that I observed, Tony, I'm interested in your view, is, and this happened at Wyndham, a division was called after that first nomination was put and an absolute majority was achieved. And I thought that was unusual for a division on a mayoral vote, not a standard resolution of the council.
Yeah, it just to me some really entrenched views, like I want it recorded that I didn't vote for you.
And
not a great
in a
way to
way,
start.
it doesn't get recorded that way because it was repeated. 6 hands, absolute majority. The second nomination didn't get put under the division either. So that's what I thought was curious.
Yeah.
Mm.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Quirky things that we pick up and talk about. Another interesting one is, as predicted, Stephen Jolly's been elected as the mayor of Yarra. Strong personal vote. Elected on first preferences, etc. A shift there, a major shift politically, if you like, with this independent group now, with the numbers at Yarra. What I was interested to get your thoughts on, Tony and Julie, was this notice of motion that Mayor Jolly has flagged. It's been reported on by the Herald Sun. I believe it was circulated to a community group prior to it even being put on the council website. And there's about 35 points to it, overturning a range of things that the previous Greens-led council made decisions on. From a purely governance point of view, what do we think about this process for overturning previous decisions of the council?
Yeah, so firstly, I'm kudos to Stephen Jolly for cracking on, if you like, starting early and clearly got an agenda and is driving that through. But from a governance perspective, the notion of having, to me, multiple matters dealt with, multiple unrelated, can I say, matters, things like e-scooters and then waste charges and pedestrian crossings and car parking, and this is reality. That's actually the sort of things that are in there. Public question time, and then some capital works in a park, all in the one notice of motion means, firstly, from a transparency perspective, the councillors only get the speaking time on one motion to deal with this. I, as a councillor, might have some concerns about one or more of those 35 elements. And, I guess I can move an amendment or request an item be moved out of the sort of broader motion, the catch-all motion. But I don't like the approach. I'm hoping that it was done just in a view to, like, let's move forward promptly rather than let's stifle any debate. But I'd much prefer to see these things moved individually, probably over the course of a couple of council meetings, given how much time it would take if you broke it up. Feel for the executive at council.
Yeah.
They're presumably being asked, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? And they're being asked to suddenly report or brief councillors on 35 items, presumably.
Yeah, Chris, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, like what Tony's saying about having 35 different items in a notice of motion seems a bit unwieldy, and also does make it very difficult for sort of, I suppose, to deal with 35 different items in one sort of report back potentially to the council. So it's complicated and could have been maybe handled a little bit differently in separating some of the key related issues out. I think might have been better. So from a governance point of view, it's probably a little bit, a little bit difficult for the organisation. But in saying that, obviously the mayor has started with a strong agenda. It's going to be interesting to see how much of these items have already been started, and I know that some of them are well underway. So it's interesting that coming back from an organisational point of view, coming back from where the position was put, could be quite costly and difficult as well. So there could be some real challenges, I think, for the organisation in this approach, and the benefits for the community. It might be really popular. I know with some of those issues, they were very controversial, so that might be popular. But concerned about the cost and the time that's going to need to be now spent on reversing some of these decisions.
It might be popular with some, but I'm sure there'll be others who don't support what's being attempted here. And I do wonder, given the way this has been brought forward with 35 basically in a block, how they're going to handle the public comment element of this. I'm not familiar with the detail of Yarra's governance rules, and obviously it will all turn on that. But just as a general principle, I don't think it's good practice to make decisions in this way. And it wouldn't even be any better if it was 35 separate notices of motion, to be honest.
Yeah,
that's not good practice either. Understand the signal that Councillor Jolly is trying to send here, and I think that's well made. These are the issues that they believe they've got a mandate to deal with. Does it all have to be dealt with in one motion at the very first meeting of the council? I get it's, we're getting into December as well, and obviously time is an issue, but there's got to be a better way than this.
Yeah, and it's bringing back all those issues onto the agenda, isn't it? That rather than moving forward and setting the new vision and the new council plan and setting all the new priorities for the new council, it's going back, isn't it? And it's spending a lot of time now on stuff that's already happened. So I don't know. I think I agree with you, Chris.
All right, so let's wait and see what happens. It might be worth tuning in for that meeting. We might need some popcorn and a few hours of free time to see how that gets dealt with next week. I noticed this that I thought was a good piece of advocacy work from Rural Councils Victoria this week. They put out a press release and an accompanying policy platform. They're getting in ahead of next year's federal elections, and the headline on the platform here is a call for a new local government commissioner to work on behalf of particularly rural and regional councils with the federal government to get greater alignment between the feds and local councils. Interesting call. Some councils are already coming out in support of this. Swan Hill is one that I noticed very quickly said, yep, we're on board with this idea as well. What do we think?
I think it's great that they're getting in nice and early. I think now is the time to start that conversation. I like the fact that they're talking about some critical things like Commonwealth disaster recovery funding, which is a real issue for a lot of the rural councils. I mean, a lot of them are crippling as a result of, some of the natural disasters that they've had locally, and they're still trying to catch up, and they're still trying to do works associated with trying to mitigate, climate change, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, these types of challenges for councils on top of rate capping are real, and there's a really strong flavour of that coming through. So they're looking, they want to boost financial sustainability, and they want to increase financial assistance grants. They want targeted funding to support community infrastructure, and we've seen the challenges that they've had around affordable housing and key worker housing and childcare. And they want more clarity and better consultation on renewable energy initiatives. And there have been some councils that have found it really difficult locally to deal with some of these renewable energy projects that are coming through without little consultation. So, yeah, it's been a challenge for them. But yeah, so I think this is fantastic. It's great work by Rural Councils Victoria.
Yeah, agreed, Julian. And what I've been saying to, the 5 or 6 councils already have been seeing with induction programs is you've got to have that conversation now at a council level. What are your top priorities, your individual priorities, councillors, and let's coalesce them into the priorities of the council in terms of that advocacy to, Commonwealth government, particularly with an election that has to occur by May of next year, could be as soon as March. And so, what we're going to see is going through councils, we're going to see candidates, both from the government, the opposition, key parties, regardless of one's personal, political affiliation, if there is one at a council, lobbying those candidates and getting the best for your communities. It's essential first that you're all focused, you're all, singing from the same hymn sheet, if you like, if you want to use that analogy, in terms of these are our priorities, and we need to get to that exercise promptly. And RCV have in fact come out and done that, and they're, you must say rural councils. Well, it's 80% or so of the Victorian land area, and I think it's about it's over 10% of the population, about 830 or something thousand people are in those rural councils. So it's not insignificant. And kudos to, I think it's Bradley Thomas, who's the secretary at RCV, the CEO at Hepburnshire, who's been a part of, and I'm sure it's a collective thing, putting this list together. But councillors, you need to be, at a council level, be thinking about your priorities, be ready to advocate, because the beauty of this forthcoming federal election is that it seems like, it's in the balance. So, either party could win. So that tends to mean there might be a few additional promises made in the hope of winning seats and all that. And we might actually see some wins for local government here.
It'll be especially compelling if rural groups in other parts of the country get behind that call for the federal commissioner, I would have thought. Yeah, you make a good point there, Bradley Thomas, the spokesperson on this, because, of course, as councils are still going through induction and mayoral election processes, the former president of that group was Marianne Thomas out at Southern Grampians, who's no longer a councillor, so we don't know who's going to be leading that group. I've reached out to Bradley to talk a bit more about this for the Local Government News Roundup, but I'm also conscious he's in the middle of inducting a new council at the moment, so probably got more important things. Yes, more important things to do.
We'll be watching this.
Just before we go to our segment with Rhys Thomas, I noticed this amusing little piece in The Age this week. I'm not sure if you saw it, where it was revealed that Lord Mayor Nicholas Rhys hired one of the former Chaser members to write his swearing-in speech and to do some speech writing for him. I assume he's going to use him in future. Not sure, but that was picked up in an amusing little piece in The Age, I think it was.
Yeah, and they said that Andrew Hansen was the one who could sing, play the piano, and write funny songs. So I think that's what they're just making a bit of a joke out of it. But
they were looking for more humour in the speech, I think.
Yeah, they maybe are. And look, humour is a good thing. Humour can bring joy to people. So there's nothing wrong with a bit of humour, as long as it's done appropriately and that it's, bring it on, I say. I think this is great that he's looking at someone that might think a little bit differently to him, that might bring a different dimension. And certainly, there'll be the checks and balances over this anyway. I mean, he's not going to be able to write anything, is he? But no. I think they're just having a little bit of fun with it. That's okay. I mean, I just think, who knows? Andrew Hansen is probably a very, very good writer. So, I say innocent until proven guilty.
All right, let's take a pause and we'll go and see what Rhys Thomas has got to say for governance aficionados this week. We'll come back and talk about a couple of big interstate stories in just a bit. Let's head over to VLGA Central now, where Rhys Thomas waits for us with this week's segment. And I imagine, Rhys, like me, you've probably been watching a few swearing-ins and mayoral election live streams this week.
Yeah, it's a bit depressing, but yes, I have been.
And what struck you? I know you've got some suggestions for people about that swearing-in process. Have we seen a few boo-boos, have we?
I have, but first I'm going to tell you a story from 2009, which you probably knew. But when Barack Obama was sworn in at his inauguration ceremony back in 2009 to become president, he actually misspoke and left out the word faithfully.
Ah, yes.
So the next day, on the advice of the White House counsel, he took the oath again in the Oval Office just to be doubly sure that, in fact, he was president. So with that in mind, I've watched a few councillor swearing-in ceremonies, and the oath that needs to be taken, or affirmation, is a bit of a word salad. And there's a few councillors that have stumbled over it.
Right.
And made errors, left words out of it. And in fact, I did come across a case, in fact, where a councillor inserted a bunch of words, effectively stating that they were making the declaration under sufferance.
Oh, so that's a little bit different to just accidentally stumbling over the words.
It is. And look, it's not a great start to the term, because something as simple as reading the oath or affirmation should be achievable. And from what I understand, the local government inspectorate have already taken an interest, because there's a question now about whether or not those councillors have actually been sworn in validly. And even more importantly, the follow-on question is the subsequent decisions that they've made, which for most councils now includes electing a mayor and deputy mayor. The question is, are those decisions valid?
Wow.
So from what I'm hearing, the inspectorate is going to be writing to all CEOs, requiring them to review their process and attest to the fact that the councillors have been sworn in properly.
This is interesting because if, let's say, devil's advocate here, let's say those mayoral election processes at some councils could be regarded as invalid because some of the councillors weren't sworn in correctly, doesn't the Act require the mayor to be elected by the 26th, the month after the election, and therefore there's a very small window to correct it?
It does. And who knows? It's really uncharted territory, because some councils will have gone beyond that and actually started making decisions and appointing people to committees and all sorts of things, setting meeting dates. Is it all out the window? The next couple of weeks is going to be pretty telling.
So I imagine after hearing this, a few governance officers will be rushing back to have a look at what actually happened and maybe listening back to the audio to ensure it's been done correctly.
Well, for those recording it, who have recorded it, that's a bonus. They can do that. I'd be watching it back, and I'd be watching it with the proper wording alongside me and making sure that every word is spoken. A lot of councillors left out the word model. A lot of councillors left out the word councillor. They said model code of conduct. I'm not quite sure why that was. At one council, I found 3 councillors that made the identical mistake. Made me wonder whether the piece of paper they were reading from was wrong.
So what do you say to those people listening to this who say this is all a storm in a teacup? It's pedantry, Rhys.
Well, yeah, it's probably pedantry, and maybe it doesn't matter. In fact, there was a piece of news recently when an Australian senator declared that, in fact, her oath into the Senate, she deliberately misspoken, and she sort of had to walk that back. And we remember that story. And there was a contrary view saying, well, the document she signed was correct, and that's all that mattered. Look, that might all be true, and it might all be a storm in a teacup, but it's a storm nonetheless.
So as we get through this next period, councils are being inducted. I imagine you're fielding a few inquiries about some logistical issues.
Yeah, there's quite a few governance officers around the sector who've perhaps not been through elections before. So I'm fielding quite a few inquiries about that. And of course, anyone that has got questions is more than welcome to reach out to me. But there's a few questions I thought I might answer. One is around personal interest returns. And the query is whether councillors that have been returned to office need to complete an initial personal interest return. The answer to that is no. There's a provision at section 133, part 4 of the Act that refers specifically to those councillors. The other question is around the deadline for that. That's 30 days from the date they took the oath or affirmation of office, not from election day or from the declaration day. It's when they took that, when they were sworn in. And so that might actually be different for different councillors. And if that date happens to fall on a weekend, then the deadline is the Monday.
Right. How about this one, Rhys? I've heard of a councillor who didn't restand, so is no longer a councillor, rang the day after the election to the council and said, hey, my personal interest return is still on the website. Can you take it off, please? Was she correct in doing that?
I think that's a reasonable request. No longer a councillor is entitled to privacy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the view that was expressed as well. What about councillor allowances?
So councillor allowances also are payable from the day the councillor was sworn in, not election day or date of declaration. One of the challenges I used to face was actually calculating the amount at the start or the end of a term, because it was a sort of a pro rata amount depending on how you pay it, and there's no actual official answer to that. So the gazetted amount is an annual amount. Some councils divide that by 12 and pay it monthly, some by 26 and pay it fortnightly. Of course, 26 isn't exactly 26 times that is not exactly 1 year. There's rounding to be done. Most people ignore that. And then, of course, if it's a part term, you've got to divide it again to work out a daily amount.
Yeah.
There's no proper methodology. My advice to people is come up with a methodology, document it, and stick with it throughout the term, and then there can be no complaints. It's all rounding error. It's tiny money. I've never seen anyone complain about it, but get it right. And calculation of the allowances or payment of allowances to your mayor and deputy mayor should take effect from the date of that they were elected to that office. So those people will receive a councillor allowance for the period between when they were sworn in up until that election day, and then the leadership allowance thereafter.
So councillor allowance from the date of the swearing in, mayor and deputies from the date of the election to that office, with a period in between for those two people in most cases.
That's right. Now, of course, for some people that's the same day, so that is a moot point. But on the subject of allowances, I've also had questions about whether or not allowances should be withheld until the training is complete,
Right.
Because that's a new provision in the Act. The answer to that is no, they don't get withheld until the training is complete. They only get withheld after a failure to complete the training. So if you've got a councillor that isn't completing the induction training or is refusing to participate, then they continue to be paid up until the 4-month deadline for completing the training and completing the declaration. So it's only at that point that they would need that the payments would be withheld. So that'll be March of next year.
And what would happen to, in that scenario, the payments that have been made up to that point?
Well, essentially, the councillor gets to keep them, and in fact, the payments that are then withheld at the point when the councillor does complete the training, then all the money that's been held aside is then paid. So there's no out of pocket situation. The councillor will get their money eventually, but they need to complete their training before they do it.
Yeah.
And so for the mayor and deputy mayor, it's the same arrangement. It's just that the deadline is 1 month after election day. So after the mayoral election day, I should say.
Yes. On the subject of mayoral training, I know you're participating in the VLGA's program that's coming up very soon now.
I am. It's a couple of weeks away, so that's the 6th of December. So any mayor or deputy mayor that would think that a day in Melbourne to learn from some established experts, including Tony Rownick from our panel here at TGU, would only have to reach out to the VLGA, and we can deliver all of the mandatory induction to you on that one day. And of course, for any governance officers that are still putting together their induction programs, or maybe they've got gaps in their programs, or even if you've got a councillor that for whatever reason couldn't attend one of the sessions that you ran, then we might be able to help you plug those gaps. So just reach out to us here at the VLGA.
I noticed in some of the communications that have come out from the Inspectorate, I think it was, a reminder to all candidates, whether they were elected or not, to get those donation returns in.
Yeah, that's right. So those reminders go out from them, but councils do play a role here, because the CEO is actually the person that collects the returns and submits a report to the minister. So governance officers should be contacting candidates to, at the very least, let them know how they should submit their return, whether that's by email or in hard copy to the council. And I would suggest that although there's no obligation to do that, it's pretty normal practice for councils, governance staff to be contacting candidates, sending them reminders, at least for those candidates for whom you have contact details, because then many councils only have the contact details that were on the VEC website. So, and not every candidate provided that. So just do your best, and I think that goes a long way.
And you've identified a mystery of the vanishing information from the
I did
VEC.
notice, on the VEC website, the up until very recently, we obviously had all the information about the candidates for elections, including their candidate statements and those questionnaires. I note that they've been now removed. It had been my understanding that the questionnaires and those candidate statements were going to remain published right throughout the term, which I think is actually a good accountability measure. At least for those candidates that were successful. But I note they're all gone, so I don't know whether they're just restructuring the website and maybe they'll reappear at some point, so I'll keep an eye on that.
Rhys, I mentioned to Tony and Julie earlier about a couple of things I've noticed in some of the live streams of mayoral elections. An absolute majority required to elect someone to a mayor or deputy mayor position. Some cases with multiple nominations where they haven't put to a show of hands the second nomination because an absolute majority has been achieved on the first. Is that good practice, do you think?
Look, I wouldn't have thought so. Particularly if there were two other candidates, then there'd be no opportunity for those candidates to test the strength of their report.
Yeah,
Look,
I did see that with one deputy mayor position. Yeah,
I would have thought that if a candidate has taken their trouble to nominate themselves or be nominated, then they probably would reasonably expect that there would be an opportunity for councillors to vote for them.
Yeah, I would have thought so too. And then to add another wrinkle to it, one case where it was only the first nomination put, an absolute majority was achieved, and someone called for a division, and the same thing was repeated without the second nomination being tested.
Well, that's puzzling. I'm not sure how you can call a division on an election, but I'm guessing that was a councillor who was wondering why there hadn't been a vote against or in favour of the other candidate and was hoping for a different mechanism to achieve it.
Could well have been.
Puzzling.
Could well have been. Sad, isn't it, that we spend our time watching and pondering these things at this time of the year?
And look, maybe it's an inside the beltway problem because it doesn't affect the outcome of any of those votes, of course. But I think sometimes these things, it's just nice to get them right, isn't it?
It is. All right. Thank you, Rhys. That's all we have from you, I think, for this week, but you've got some busy times ahead by the sounds of it.
Oh, yeah, look, I'm out and about visiting a number of councils next week, as I have been this week, but I'll make time to drop back into the VLGA studio and we'll catch up again next week.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Rhys.
No worries. Thanks.
Always useful insights there, particularly for governance officers in our chat with Rhys Thomas, who'll be back again next week on TGU. Tony Rownick and Julie Reid with me. We've got a couple more stories just to touch on before we wrap up. We've been monitoring this one out of Queensland for some time. The Mayor of Townsville, Troy Thompson, has finally been suspended as of yesterday. The local government minister there, Anne Lay, confirmed that Mr. Thompson would be suspended for 12 months from today, Friday, on full pay, which has prompted a bit of discussion and debate. Of course, you might recall, Tony and Julie, that the Crime and Corruption Commission there is looking into allegations that he misrepresented his history, particularly his military history during the election campaign before he was elected as mayor back in March of this year. So I think you said about time, Tony, meaning about time there was some sort of resolution to this issue.
Yeah, we've been talking about this over many episodes, haven't we, Chris and Julie? And I guess our viewers on TGU can decide for themselves whether they think Mr. Thompson's claims that he made an honest mistake about his military service. And I think he said, I firmly believed until I received this report that I had served for 5 years, and I did sign up for the military in '89. It turns out I didn't sign up then. I signed up several years later in '91 or whenever it was, and I couldn't remember my service number. Well, we can all, I guess, make up our own minds how credible we think that might be.
And I guess the thing to remember here is Townsville. What do they call it? A garrison town? Is that the term?
Oh, yeah.
Strong
Very
military. Yeah.
RAF. It's I think there's about 6,000 person defence force personnel and their families that reside in Townsville, and yeah, would be, you know, the ears would be pricked and listening, and anything defence related statements. And yeah, I'm not surprised that people have tracked down this story, and eventually there's been seemingly some at least temporarily adverse consequences, and we'll see what transpires in terms of whether Troy Thompson gets to come back after his suspension.
But in the meantime, still
He gets
being paid
paid.
his $250,000 per annum.
I can't imagine
225, I think, but
that won't be
yeah,
going down
significant.
very well with the community. Surely
No.
not. The community would be asking questions about that, surely. So, you know, maybe,
are.
yeah. So, you know, it's that's a strange decision, shall we say. Anyway,
But I'm sure it's based on some legal advice.
Yeah.
yes, potentially. Yeah.
As
That
we know,
that might be the only reason why. Who knows?
well, we know that the Premier was waiting for Crown
Yeah.
advice on that issue before moving. So we'll keep an eye on that one. I'm not sure how advanced the Triple C is with their probe, as it's been called. It's been going for a few months now. The deputy mayor there will step up in the meantime, and I assume will be being paid the mayoral allowance as well. And out of Tasmania, Central Highlands there, interesting story here where the mayor is sort of already under caution, ministerial order to undergo training to improve in various ways, but has also been found through a code of conduct process to have committed some breaches and ordered to complete some training to better understand her role. So, Tony, it's not just Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland that's having some of these council law behavioural issues.
You're right, Chris. And yes, having accused colleague councillors of corruption or being corrupt, or certainly that words to that effect, the mayor has agreed to withdraw those comments and desist from making those comments. And as we know, we know from a line of conduct cases in Victoria that accusing a colleague of being corrupt without you know, the benefit of a court decision that actually determines precisely that would be a misconduct offence. It would be showing a lack of courtesy, respect, you know, denigrating, discrediting the council, etc. And so I'm not surprised that comments of this nature have attracted that sort of attention and ultimately this sanction against the mayor there in Central Highlands.
So this Mayor, Councillor Louine Triffett, the panel actually said it would have suspended her for the breaches that it has determined, if not for this improvement order that's already in place from the previous local government minister there, Nick Street, who's stood down a few weeks ago. So again, not a great look, Julie, not the sort of publicity that council would be wanting to have. In this case, it's happening nationally through ABC and others.
No, and telling your general manager that they're the problem, you know, is not acceptable, you know, in a public environment. I mean, it's just, you know, you don't do that kind of thing, and you know, it does tarnish your reputation. It tarnishes your reputation from the point of view of you know, the council overall and what the culture's like within the organisation, but also, you know, leaders that might be interested in working there might think twice if they think they're going to be criticised publicly in that way. They may choose not to go to that council and choose somewhere else to go instead.
Yeah, so Central Highlands, for those who don't know, it's a municipality right in the middle of Tasmania, as the name suggests. I imagine it's a very picturesque place to visit.
Beautiful place, yeah.
All right, so I think that was all we had on our list this week, unless Julie and Tony have got anything to add. Oh, Tony, you've picked up on a this is a sad little story out of the southwest corner of the state.
It's sort of, you know, it's the times we're in, Chris and Julie, but an article in The Age today by Tony Wright, who's you know, a prolific reporter, or someone I follow, but is about the sale of local newspapers, or the demise of local newspapers, probably the better way to phrase it. And the Casterton News, which services that far southwest corner of Victoria, That's up for sale. It's founded in 1869. If the owners don't find a buyer by December, they'll be closing the presses, and that local paper servicing and providing news to that local community will be gone. The nearby Portland Observer, the Shire of Glenelg there, that is printing its last copy in December. The Hamilton Spectator up the road in that that Western Victoria area, around since 1859, that's going silent from December of this year. And in the last decade, over 200 of these local papers have closed or ceased printing, and many more are teetering at the moment. They have, according to the story, they've got these ancient or old printing presses. When they break down or need updating to modern tech, it's an expensive exercise. We are occasionally seeing the big media outlets moving in and buying the paper names, but then the papers often become just the same story in all the papers. It's not actually local news at all. It's just got the heading, the local newspaper name at the top. So at a local government level, we really do rely a lot on these papers, both for the council to get messages out, to do its advertising, its public notices, to have the local media watching council meetings, reporting on what's going on. A great source of intel for the community. And I think maybe I'm a dinosaur. I read the news on the digital newspapers these days, but it would be a shame if we saw these papers not publishing in any form, any local news in any form going forward. So I think it would have a real impact, and it is having a real impact on the way these councils operate and how informed the community is.
Yeah, I wonder
Agree.
whether it's just that whole converting to digital, because everybody's looking at papers online now, and digital methods are being used mostly by the younger generation as well. And is it just that they just can't pivot to that space? They're just not able.
Well, it's about it being financially viable to do so,
that's
and
right.
to generate a revenue stream. I think it's tragic. It brings back memories that reading that article from my early days in television and radio newsrooms that no longer exist. They're going the way of, the old GMB6 television station that's not there anymore. It's really sad to think about. Sign of the times, I guess, but one would have hoped there could have been a model that came up with to continue to help these papers exist and provide the important service they do to local communities. And it's a symptom that's being felt right across the country, Tony, not just there in the southwest of Victoria, sadly.
Yeah, it is sad. Yeah.
All right.
End of an
That's
era. End of an era.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you for alerting us to that, Tony. Thank you both for your thoughts, as always, on the panel this week. Thanks also to Rhys Thomas for his insights. We'll all be back next week as the end of the year starts to barrel towards us. Tony, thanks to the team at Hunt & Hunt for their ongoing support for TGU. And we'll be back with you for more VLGA Connect next week. Until then, from all of us here, bye for now.